It's 3 in the morning and there's a missile alert.
Well, he was caught up in a missile alert while visiting the Mykolaiv region, and he saw homes destroyed by bombing raids and visited children recovering from life-changing injuries in hospital. I'm delighted to say that he joins me now on the sofa. And Dom, just a taste of what you were experiencing there, and you're just saying you've had your first proper, really good night's sleep.
I did, yeah. It's one of the weird things when you... I mean, one of the things I didn't realise when you go into that sort of area is technology has moved on. So, you know, before you go to Ukraine, you're recommended you download an app. It's called Air Alert Ukraine. You put in the places you're going to, and then any time something takes off from somewhere or a missile is launched, this app goes off telling you to go to the shelter. Then you have the air alerts going off, and then as they know where whatever's coming in is going, they kind of narrow it down. But it does make for very fitful night's sleep, yeah, because you're constantly being woken up. And it is a kind of terror tactic in a sense, because it's just keeping people constantly on edge.
And of course, you have the luxury of going in and coming out again.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was there 3 days and it was stressful, but I mean, that's nothing. But it's that prolonged, just permanent state of slight anxiety and nerves that must be just unbearable, especially for kids.
Mm. What is life like for the kids out there?
I think one of the things that I found really weird about Ukraine is that a lot of it is very normal. I mean, you know, I grew up in Lebanon. I know what it's like in a war, that people do try and keep going and try and have some sort of normal life, and it's interspersed with stuff happening. And so sometimes when you go, you think, well, there's not a war on. I mean, these cities are going on fine. But it really affects the kids more than anything else, because the one thing that's really stopped is education. So schools have been bombed. You can't open a school now unless it has a bomb shelter, which none of them had. And they've got broken windows and they've got stuff that's not working. So a lot of kids in Ukraine now are spending a lot of time underground in bunkers. They're doing all their education online. They've been dispersed around the country, if not out of the country. And they apart from education, they just don't have a social life. They're not being allowed to be kids. And so I followed one of Save the Children's mobile digital learning centres, and they go out to sort of remote villages near the front line and basically at least give the kids twice a week some sort of class. But really, it's more that they can just have a social life and be kids and act together. And
that's important. I mean, we learned it here in this country with COVID, didn't we? That when
100%.
Children can't be together, it really affects their resilience.
That's one of the real ironies of Ukraine, is that they've just been through COVID and they've sort of got used to learning online. And just as that's coming to an end, this started. So it's just been, you know, that's a really long period in someone's childhood to live that kind of existence.
And you mentioned growing up in Beirut. I mean, how did that compare? I mean, obviously technology, you know, and all of that has changed massively, hasn't it? So, you know, their experience of childhood living in a war zone, quite different from yours. Yeah,
I was trying to think of the differences. I mean, we did have shelters, and the Lebanese are very kind of, because it went on for so long, there was a little bit of life goes on. So I remember going to school and then there'd be an air raid or shells would land and we'd all go into a shelter and wait till it was over and then come back out and carry on with the class. Stuff did just carry on in Lebanon, but I think I mean, I certainly wasn't, you know, we were shelled, and I did live through a war. I found it incredibly stressful and anxious when I came over here. And I think looking back, I don't know if I had PTSD or whatever, but I certainly was affected by it. And back then, there's nothing. I mean, no one talks to you about that. It's just like, stiff upper lip, carry on. And I think one of the great things that really sort of gives me hope is when you go and see these kids who are clearly stressed. I mean, I met kids that had been, you know, on a railway station and being hit by shells where 60 people were killed, and others that had fled from Mariupol. And they've really had stressful stuff. And at least there is a place, and Save the Children organise kind of people that they can talk to and at least try and talk through what's going on, and that's so important.
What do you think? Did you learn anything from the experience? You know, obviously seeing it firsthand, but you've been to Ukraine before. Yeah,
I have been to Ukraine before. I just learned, it's just such an extraordinary conflict because it's so massive, and it seems to have sort of ground to a halt. It's almost like a First World War situation where people are taking, you know, 100 meters of land and then losing it again. So it seems to be in a sort of limbo. And that, as I said, does allow people in the big cities to kind of have a normal-ish life. But the kids are the ones that are really affected by it. And that's what I really realised. You can see the longer it goes on, the more effect it has on the children.
Which is also storing up problems for the future of the country as well, isn't it?
Massively, in every way, yeah. Because, I mean, this is a whole generation that has now been pretty much online, living dispersed from their friends, having families broken up, and being incredibly stressed for over 4 years now.
So you've put this documentary together. What are you hoping it's going to achieve?
I suppose because I'm an ambassador for Save the Children, I like lots of people think, well, what are these charities doing? What's actually happening on the ground? And I was as eager to see as anyone else is. So really, they just gave me the opportunity to go and see all the different things that they do, from giving people cash grants. We met a family that they were living right on the front line in a village that was on the front line, and they left after about 4 days of fighting. The next day, their house was completely destroyed by a bomb. Finally, they've managed to move back. Now the front line's moved, but they had no money. They both lost their jobs. So say the children were able to give them a cash grant straight away just to help them get back on their feet while they were living with relatives. I met training centres where teachers were being taught how to teach online. I mean, there's so much stuff going on the ground, and it's so helpful. And I met people that were just so grateful, literally coming up and saying, can you thank people in Britain, certainly for people who'd put up, people who'd gone out there, well, thanks Save the Children for what they've done. So it was amazing, actually.
Well, it's really great for you to come in and talk to us.